Behold, the worst televised debate between two politicians that has ever happened. It happened in the state of Pennsylvania. One is a man who is a doctor on television. The other is a hardcore leftist activist who has had a stroke. John Fetterman is the Democratic nominee, the current lieutenant governor. He wears a hoodie because he's down with the real people. Hardcore leftist who basically did his bit to make sure that Joe Biden would absolutely win the state of Pennsylvania, and his prize is to run for the US Senate. He is up against Dr. Mehmet Oz. Now, Dr. Oz is one of those people who I have no idea is part of the political process, but he was famous on TV once, so he gets the approval of, among others, the former President of the United States, the great Donald Trump. So you can like or dislike Donald Trump, but Dr. Oz is where I'm going to draw the line here. Now, if this was a normal election, probably the Democrat would be able to win in a state called Pennsylvania because Democrats have been doing pretty well and they're able to get out the vote, particularly in the city of Philadelphia. But this ain't no new election. Firstly, Biden is very low in the polls. And secondly, did I mention that the Democrat has had a stroke and is a hardcore leftist? So, latest opinion polls going into this debate show that the race is tightening. And when I mean tightening, I mean flip a coin. Fetterman is now down about 1.5 points. Oz is up 2.5 points, and there is not a percentage between them right now. So, because the bloke who'd had a stroke can't quite understand all the words that are being said to him, they set up a closed captioning system above the debate moderators so he could read the questions that they were asking. Now, if you were a voter in Pennsylvania, would you want this hardcore leftist to be your next senator? Because I think anyone who watches this will say, hell freaking no. Let's start with, how does he go at the very start of the debate?
What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody. I'm running to serve Pennsylvania. He's running to use Pennsylvania. Here's a man that spent more than $20 million of his own money to try to buy that seat. I'm also having to talk about something called the Oz rule, that if he's on TV, he's lying.
Okay. And then, of course, there is the flip-flopping about fracking. In Pennsylvania, this is a very big issue because there's a lot of jobs in that industry. This is a long grab. It's an awkward grab. But imagine being a voter in Pennsylvania. Could anyone vote for this guy?
2018 interview, you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. I never have. But earlier this month, you told an interviewer, quote, I support fracking. I support the energy independence that we should have here in the United States. So, Mr. Fetterman, please explain your changing position. 60 seconds.
I've always supported fracking. And I always believe that independence with our energy is critical, and we can't be held, ransom to somebody like Russia. I've always believed that energy independence is critical, and I've always believed that, and I do support fracking. I've never taken any money from their industry, but I support how critical it is that we produce our own energy and create energy independence.
I must correct the record.
Just a second, Mr. Oz. I do want to clarify something. You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand, and I do support fracking.
And then, just to bring it home, the actual central issue of all of this is, could you please provide some medical information that, despite the obvious difficulties we can see you having right now, that you are okay to serve as a lawmaker in the United States Senate? Again, long grab. Wow.
Last week, you released this note from your doctor saying you can work full duty in public office, but you have not released your detailed medical records surrounding your stroke. Mr. Fetterman, will you pledge tonight to release those records in the interest of transparency? You have 60 seconds.
No. To me, for transparency is about showing up. I'm here today to have a debate. I have, speeches in front of 3,000 people in Montgomery County, all across Pennsylvania, big crowds. I believe if my doctor believes that I'm fit to serve, and that's what I believe is appropriate. And now with 2 weeks before the election, I have run a campaign and I've been very transparent about being very open about the fact we're in use captioning. And I believe that, again, my doctors, the real doctors that I believe in, they all believe that I'm ready to be served.
Follow up, I didn't hear you say you would release your full medical records. Why not? You have 30 seconds.
No. Again, my doctor all believes that I'm fit to be serving, and that's what I believe is where I'm standing.
Is it over yet? Now, what is particularly frustrating for the people of Pennsylvania here is they've got a choice between a TV doctor and a guy who, it's pretty obvious, is going to have some big struggles writing legislation. But the problem is that this is one of the races that if it goes their way, control of the Senate goes their way. Put simply, this is currently a Republican seat. If the Democrats win it, then they can afford to lose one somewhere else, they maintaining control of the US Senate. If the Republicans can hold this seat, and all they have to do is win one somewhere else, they get control of the US Senate. So therefore, we have two people who should not be running for US Senate, who should not be the people who represent their party. But because control of the Senate is on the line, your choice is between that one and that one. As for the bloke who's the hardcore leftist who had the stroke, even people who desperately hate Dr. Oz and Donald Trump had to say, no, they can't do this.
That was hard to watch. And I kept thinking, as this debate went on, how irresponsible it was for Democrats and for Fetterman's family and for the people around him to allow him to proceed into this general election.
Absolutely true. They could have had somebody else, but they decided because he had to be rewarded for his efforts in 2020 that Fetterman had to be the candidate. If they lose the seat, it's because of that arrogance. But as for MSNBC, let's just change the subject.
And I want to give that credit to John Fetterman for trying to do his best under a certain set of circumstances that were not favorable for him, but he gave a valiant effort. I admire what John Fetterman tried to do tonight, and Mr. Oz should be ashamed of himself for the things that he said, the positions that he has taken. He has no legitimacy in this race. He parachuted into Pennsylvania. He's trying to steal a seat.
Come off it. For the poor people of Pennsylvania, you have to vote, but how could you possibly choose?